the outcome of this categorization experiment as achieved by the Federal Customs Administration. Indeed, this enables the customs authorities to evaluate the activities of the participants of foreign trade. This evaluation is also used for a huge methodology work underway in the risk management area, and this will be used to prepare new risk profiles for their practical use in customs control activities. And the risks themselves that exist, that have been established, will be finalized, or as we say it, they are updated, and if there's a risk established based on an evaluation, the customs authorities receive information that hypothetically a risk has never realized. So indeed, violations have been identified, and then they can be a basis for canceling a specific risk profile. And in the course of the second phase of this experiment, we've abandoned the idea of separating everyone into two categories, and we've adopted a four-tier evaluation of foreign trade players in terms of the risks as assessed by the system. And what should also be noted when you tell this, it may seem attractive, but in terms of practical aspects, this aspect does not anticipate any initiative. However, there's quite a few cases, including those involving my clients. They can see that other members of the industry, in terms of the use of this automated approach, they have already become classified in a fairly high category. But they're wondering, why are we not yet there? Because judging by the way a company positions itself, and they would may think that they may expect to be already on a fairly high level where risks are assessed as fairly low. And since this is still an experiment, a dialogue is acceptable with the Customs Administration. Since this is an experiment, however automated it is, and my second education is legal, but I'm an engineer. In terms of my first education, so the task is set by people. So depending on how the criteria are defined, you will get whatever can be obtained using human resources. So you need a dialogue to be able to understand where the imperfections are still exist in this categorization system. So in a dialogue with the customs authorities, there is a possibility to fine-tune the parameters, to demonstrate your specific lines of business, to have the system, to contribute to improving the system. My computer seems to be frozen.
No? Коллеги,
Can I have some technical assistance? Because my slides don't seem to be changing. Now, moving further to this so-called sectoral grading, we are now working on approaches that the Customs Administration initiated on the first phase. Now we're moving to phase two of categorization. But still, if you're a production company or a manufacturing enterprise, the parameters as set for you to hit the white list of manufacturers, they're still used by the customs authorities today, and companies can show their initiative and can go to the Customs Administration asking them to be included in the so-called white list. And let me make a reservation right away. For all these industrial exceptions, even if a company is in the green sector of production companies or the white list, well, all these terms are very approximate. And be it auto manufacturers or producers of auto parts and or components. This is not to say that if you are in the sector of selected companies, then no customs control will be used to you. That is not right. All those parameters, the advantages that I summarized in a previous slide, they are indicative of the fact that control remains in place for all, but the human factor is excluded in the customs control. And such companies will be the object of attention of the customs authorities only if a generator of random numbers works or if a customs risk realizes. Now, looking at the statistics, the white list of manufacturers, of car manufacturers, includes 8 companies today and a few companies that produce auto parts. A customer that asked to be included in the white list, well, it's them. They said that once they received instructions from the federal administration, they had a feeling that the customs administration forgot about them because they had no customs inspections over the last year. So, since this is still an experiment, and the customs authorities are not trying to make this popular, these instruments. There's not so many companies using these tools. They are kind of exclusive for the time being. Not many people know about them, but you're encouraged to use them and to I know that many logistic companies are present here, and when a company has such a formalized status of a good faith player in foreign trade, this helps a lot to to the logistics industry. Now, finally, what I'd like to discuss as part of the status of logistics operator. This is not a new institution in the EU. This was implemented more than 10 years ago. As regards Russia and the customs union, this is a fairly new institution. We have been very cautious in implementing these procedures as contemplated for the authorized economic operators, as they call them. And as of today, there's just a few articles in the Customs Code of the Customs Union. Everything else is regulated on a national level. That is, each individual country establishes its own exclusions or um, advantages or benefits. If you take the customs code of the Eurasian Union, then you will see a separate section on this. And as part of the working group, as member of the working group, I can tell you that in terms of the Eurasian Economic Commission, this there's a very favorable attitude towards this institution. And how shall I put this? Representatives of the authorities view the need to improve this institution. They're very interested in that. They are willing to adapt the international best practices, including European best practices. And in terms of the benefits, the most attractive is perhaps the opportunity to deliver your goods, and this is shown on this final slide. When having the status of an economic operator, you can have your goods transported from the customs border not to the site of the economic, well, it's taken to the site of the economic operator and immediately can go into production. And in general, there's no restrictions to selling these goods. And getting back to the advantages, this is a compilation of a number of advantages with delivery of the goods to your site. You save time, you save money, because you don't need to do anything on temporary warehouses. There's no temporary warehousing because, otherwise you always run into costs associated with that. And in using such a procedure, when the goods are released prior to the filing of a customs declaration, and usually financial people are very concerned about this procedure because this procedure enables you not to lend the state, as it happens today, when there's a certain deposit made in favor of the customs administration. Now, but here, you bring your goods, and then on the 10th of the next month, you file a declaration, and the month after, you have to remit your customs payments. So there's kind of a interest-free deferred payment. I could continue forever because there's always a lot to discuss about this, but I'm happy to continue discussing this offline. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Wilhelmina, for giving us an update on the ever-changing challenges of the customs and regulations in Russia. Next up, I'd like to welcome, already behind me, Alexander Rogan, the CEO of Russia Supply Chain. Thank you, Alexander.
Thank you. Good morning. Go right in. Go right in. Okay. So. Okay. Well, we have a compatibility problem, but never mind. I wanted to take more of a holistic view of the market, and I thought perhaps a good way of starting that was to take an English expression that's supposed to be a translation of a traditional Chinese curse, and it's "May you live in interesting times." The nearest is actually not. I mean, it's typically English. We made it up as we went along. The closest rendition you can get from the Chinese expression is that it's better to live as a dog in an era of peace than as a man in time of trouble. And I think certainly, regardless of the origin of the expression, working in Russia and being in the automotive sector, we're definitely living and working in interesting times. Okay, never mind. Now, whether we consider the changes that are going on in our industry, whether these are sort of attributed to recession, government policies, or both, we're definitely in a time of flux, in a time of change. Competition is very intense. Logistics companies are having to consider changing their models. I say that advisedly because they're not necessarily doing that. Definitely have to think about changing their practices in order to remain relevant, as well as belt tightening because of tightening financial pressures on their businesses. Car manufacturers are either facing increased prosperity or a woeful time, that they're in trouble. The only good news out of the car sector at the moment seems to be coming from either Korean or Japanese manufacturers, or those manufacturers who have been very successful with their localization program. In fact, the US and European manufacturers who haven't embraced localization are watching their market shrink and taking a real hammering with the depreciation of the ruble against the euro and the dollar. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that Russia hasn't been able to move away from being a commodity economy. Russia is very much dependent upon its natural resources. Perhaps it's unrealistic to expect for us to expect that Russia could have changed from that, given the size of the oil and gas industry here. But the fact is that if you look at history and you track the value of oil, look through the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. As oil prices have increased and dropped, Russia's followed the same. We had a very short, sharp shock recently, market correction, if you like, between 2008 and 2009. That was started because the value of oil dropped. Value of oil picked up. We picked up ourselves, and now we're here in 2014. And we find ourselves in not in a dissimilar position as we were 6 years ago. So my point is that this is very much the Russia that we work in, and we have these peaks and troughs, and we have to deal with it. We have to adapt with those. We've had some good times. You know, I mean, if we look at prior to 2008, our industry saw exceptional growth. In the late 1990s, early 2000s, imported car sales were a very, very small part of the market. And then by the time we hit 2008, the crash, car imports were running at like 65% of sales. So it was a considerable improvement. So this is our new normal. Looking at the two previous crises and the situation we're in at the moment, there are some similarities. We had a very weak ruble 98 that led to a market crash. 2008, there was pressure on the ruble. More importantly, I think, was the price of the oil. Yeah, $12 a barrel in the big crash. $34 a barrel by the end of 2008. What is very interesting and important is that in 2008, in July, price of oil peaked at $147 a barrel, and in the space of 6 months, it dropped. And we walked off the edge of a cliff, as anybody that was here can remember. So now we're in a situation where we've got similar credentials, you know, a weakening ruble, inflation that's nothing like as bad as it has been, but there is a pressure. And like in the two other previous instances, 98 it was the fallout from Chechnya, 2008 was the 5-day war in Georgia, and now there's a problem in Ukraine. So all of this puts serious pressures upon the market. But it's always been like that, yeah. So, and we've got a situation now where we have winners and losers. You know, some people are actually doing very well, some aren't doing quite so well as others. I think the ones that aren't doing quite so well as the others are perhaps bringing, certainly to a certain extent, bringing it upon themselves. If you look at the Japanese and Korean manufacturers, they are selling cars. They are very strong on localization. They are benefiting from ruble appreciation against the currency, but they are also building the right car at the right price, and so people are buying it. And if you look at car sales for the first quarter of this year, I hold they're still quite reasonable volumes. Nothing like what was originally expected. You know, there was talk about 3 million car sales a year. But even so, if you extrapolate what we've had in the first quarter, I think they're quite reasonable. You look at who's doing what, there are manufacturers who are seeing jumps in sales, so they are benefiting. Not everybody. Again, the fact that car prices have increased, that doesn't tell me that that's a particularly bad market. You're looking at like nearly a 30% increase in prices since 2007. So if people weren't willing to pay and buy the right car, you wouldn't have a market that's like that. What's definitely happened is the market has changed. And on the back of the Russian government's incentive to push for greater manufacturing in Russia, the inward investment protocols that they've introduced, we've seen that domestic production has dipped during the crisis years and then picked up. So now, 2013, we're looking at reasonable volumes being produced by manufacturers in Russia. What we've definitely seen is a change in imports. Imports have dropped by like nearly 1 million cars over that period of time. That's had a huge impact on logistics service providers because you're looking at perhaps 100,000 less truck movements per year now than we were 5, 6, 7 years ago. And also, interestingly, as part of this drive for inward investment and to improve the Russian manufacturing capability, we're seeing exports again. Yeah, so and that is particularly interesting, I think. So what do we do? What opportunities have we got? Are there any opportunities? I mean, there's a lot of doom and gloom. I think there are. I think that whether you're a car manufacturer or you're a logistics service provider, you've really got to put your business development hat on and actually start looking at what can you do. There are some real opportunities that are actually available in the marketplace. There are still niches that aren't covered. There's virtually no green logistics in Russia, and that's ridiculous. I mean, I know one car manufacturer is generating 60 tons of waste a week, and they pay to have that taken away. So it's 60,000 kilos of boxes, wood, cardboard that goes into landfill. So if you've got somebody who's got an opportunity to develop a recyclable, returnable emballage, then it's absolutely an opportunity that's going begging. Likewise, there's very few cross-dock operations supporting the automotive clusters. So you're finding that car manufacturers and their tier suppliers are having to almost following the old Soviet style, where a car manufacturer sets up a plant, his tier suppliers follow, and they're next door. If you look at the way it works in Europe or the States, they could be hundreds of miles away, it doesn't matter. They could rely upon a transport operation to feed the factories. That's not happening here. So that means there is an opportunity there for logistics service providers to step up and provide that. It's not just logistics service providers also, there's opportunities here for car manufacturers to build the right car for the right market. Some are, as I've said earlier, some aren't. You saw that the subcompact market absolutely crashed. Some car manufacturers are sat on tens of thousands of cars that nobody had an interest in. They can't do that. It's just not, it's not a viable market to do that. So my suggestion is that the car manufacturers concentrate on what they're good at, and if they're good at building good cars, build good cars. I think they should be developing their relationships with their logistics service providers better. I think there's been a lot of lip service paid to this. I've been in Russia for 10 years, and I've been to many of these conferences, and I've heard many representatives of car manufacturers saying, yes, we want a closer relationship. We don't think our service providers understand what we want. And I've heard it too many times, I've seen it too many times. If a car manufacturer wants a logistics service provider to invest in the market, then I think they need to step up as well. They need to nurture business relationships, because I think that's lacking. There's still a lot of ill will left over from the last crisis. A lot of businesses went out of business because of the dive, and there was no support there. I was having a conversation yesterday. We were talking with one of the members of the audience, and we were talking about investment by businessmen in Russia. And it's quite difficult because there's a cultural issue here. People are worried about putting their hands in their pockets and actually establishing infrastructure that's not liquid, that's not mobile. Historically, there's been a danger that somebody would come along and maybe have an asset grab, somebody pinch something. Now, I think to the main those days have gone, but still there is a cultural difficulty amongst some people to actually do that, to invest in material that's going to stay here in the country. I don't think businesses will do that unless they get the support from the car manufacturers, unless the car manufacturers actually make them feel comfortable. And I've got an example today. There's one car manufacturer who will remain nameless, just invested in 100 trucks and 100 European spec car transporters. So that's a sizable dollar investment. That's 100 trucks and trailers are actually laying idle now. Now, I think they failed. They failed in developing their relationship with the service provider. They shouldn't do that. They should be concentrating on building a good working relationship with their partners, and let the logistics service provider provide the trucks. Why does a car manufacturer have to do that? If you take that model, you're going to go all the way back to Henry Ford, where he owned the farms that raised the cattle so he could get the leather for his seats. I mean, it's sublime to the ridiculous. You just don't do that. Yeah. So I think everybody's got to step up. Everybody's got to show leadership. I think everybody needs to consider their number one asset. I think that's their staff. And I hope you like my cartoon, because when I used to be employed, it used to feel like this on a Monday. It's Monday, go to work. I think whether you're a service provider, logistics service provider, or an employer, I think now we've got this decrease in business. Now's the time to actually get hold of your staff, the ones that you've got left, because obviously there is a lot of cut, and take those 5 points, motivate them, make sure the morale is there, give them recognition, reward them, and then you'll keep your staff. This isn't rocket science. Out in the regions, in some of the clusters, some of the tier manufacturers and OEMs are giving their staff monthly pay rises just to keep the staff, because there's so much pressure and the demographic isn't right. I think if the leadership was there and if people actually wanted to work for a particular company, then it wouldn't be such an issue. So as well as motivating them, I think you need to let your staff know exactly what they ought to be doing. And And this is, this is the comment on the screen now. CFO asks his CEO, what happens we invest in developing our people and they leave the company? And then the CEO answers, well, what happens if we don't and they stay? And that's, there's a bit of a joke there, there's some humour there, but like many jokes, there's more than an element of truth in that. There's some anecdotal evidence coming out of the States that attributes a value of $350 billion to employees who are not engaged in their businesses. These are people who turn up to work and they go through the numbers. Another anecdote that I picked up on was that an employee who is engaged, who does want to work for the company, is actually 50% more efficient than the guy who sat next to him who really doesn't care. Now, those are sobering numbers. I mean, that's big ticket stuff. And they're people that you've got, they're assets that you have. They're already there. You don't have to pay anybody to give them to you. All you have to do is work with them a little bit better. And then, perhaps you'll see greater efficiencies. And, whether it's a greater drop delivery rate if you're a parcel carrier, or less damage in your cars if you're a car transporter, or producing, more cars on the production line if you're a manufacturer. Whatever it is, everybody can benefit. So I think we're seeing a downturn, and rather than running around being overly concerned about it, I think as businesses, everybody's got to take a good look at what they're doing. Your staff are your greatest asset. If you get that right, if you can motivate those people, train them properly, then I think you can do okay. And we can look back perhaps in 5 years at another conference and think, well, yeah, okay, it was another dip, it was another downturn. It's getting a bit boring, really. I mean, we just go through this. This is life in this part of the world. So that's my thoughts on the story. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex, for a very interesting and honest presentation on the development of the automotive logistics industry. In fact, the automotive industry in Russia, really. Next up, I'd like to welcome to the stage Artem Shepelyaev, the Chief Deputy of October Transport for Russian Railways. Thank you, Artem.
Добрый день, дамы и господа. I'll speak Russian.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will be presenting in Russian. First and foremost, why I am here. As was mentioned by Louis, the golden sponsor of this conference, Jeffco. Last year, the Russian railroads has acquired Jeffco for 1 billion euros. Hence, now we take all measures in terms of integrating our experience, our opportunities, in order to understand which benefits and advantages may be gained, how we should be developing in order to increase the efficiency of the Russian railroads holding. And I'm here not so much to tell you about our achievements, but mainly to learn from you, to listen about what requirements exist now in this segment in the automotive cluster and logistics. The Russian railroads nowadays is a commercial company. The main shareholder of this company is the Russian Federation. We have a very big holding with huge number of subsidiaries. And just a few words about it. My presentation is not going to be long either. I represent here the distribution block of the open joint stock company of the Russian railroads. Is the head office of the holding and the northwest branch of it. We're based in St. Petersburg and service all the northwestern region of Russia as one of the most interesting regions of Russia from the point of view of automotive logistics, because in the northwest we have the biggest auto manufacturers of Russia, the big ports, which actually transport both finished vehicles and automotive parts and components. My presentation is also in Russian, but with my story it will be more understandable. We have several subsidiaries within our holding. They are quite well known and they are very effective on the market of automotive logistics. And they are RZD Logistics, Rail Transavto Company, and Jeffco. This year, in our holding, goes under the slogan of working out an approach how to manage our subsidiaries, how to distribute the authorities in between them, how to concentrate on their competences, how to take decisions in one or under one brand. We have our customers and partners present here, and we are going to work as well in terms of studying how to achieve all these goals. We have two main areas of work: transportation of finished vehicles and transportation of auto components and parts. The Trans-Container Company provides services in terms of transporting containers on container trains. There are similar solutions in RZD Logistics, while Jeffco is the largest company in the area of automotive logistics, based that started with the Peugeot Citroën services, and this year we are trying to find out within our holding how to act in the same direction and in cooperation in between us. Alexander was absolutely right in terms of the necessity of leadership. That's what we are lacking now, and that's what I liked very much in his presentation. Russian railroads, certainly, as mentioned by Alexander, we didn't manage to live through the last decade of the commodities very well, and the automotive cluster occupies less than 1% in the cargo turnover. The main cargoes are oil, coal, and other general cargoes. Automotive logistics has absolutely different requirements in terms of organizing their deliveries. As an example, I can very briefly mention what way we have chosen. All these mass commodities are usually carried out by large block trains in huge amounts. As for the auto manufacturers, auto logistics, small batches are characteristic, and all the technologies of the Russian railroads was aimed to use these huge block trains, and we're trying to change our technologies now in order to combine this impact of large deliveries of commodities and automotive logistics. As of today, we'll have another presentation by Jeffco that will tell more specifically about very concrete logistics solutions. The idea of our service, we organize them as an example of cargo express service. We are now combining trains on the principle of reserving the cars' places. We know how many cars will be ready for certain directions. We actually form them and send them without bypassing the marshalling yards. Those who know our business understand that this is very difficult to do, but we're going to do this anyway because we understand that we have to develop our company. These cargoes that are transported within the automotive segment are the most cost efficient for us as well. We are we are working in terms of several services from St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg and Ust-Luga are the points of departure, and from here the trains may go to any destination point in Russia, be it Novosibirsk or anything else where the vehicles are being expected. We are collecting all these cars, railroad cars, at one marshalling yard where we form an express train that reaches Siberia in the course of 5 days and the Urals in the course of 4 days. The advantage here is that it bypasses all the other marshalling yards, which is very important for the vehicles because there is no waste of time, and the security of cargo is drastically increased, and we are striving to achieve 0% of damages when transporting vehicles in such a way. Another important thing is that all of us present here, we understand that any logistics company that offers the railroad service or the railroad element of transportation, at the end of the day receives this service from the Russian railroads, which is the main railroad company of the country, because we are responsible for the technology of railroad transportation and the quality of the service provided, as well as the security to a certain degree. We have certain cost benefits when we transport cargoes to far destinations, to remote destinations like Siberia and the Urals. Also, very low rate of damages, and the same as Alexander mentioned, the environmental issues. We are trying to form a new trend on the Russian market of an environmentally friendly element in logistics. It is a very important trend, and it hasn't been developed in Russia. Certainly, it's very difficult to develop it during the crisis, but still we have certain measures in terms of the green logistics. We understand that the conservation measures are very important for us. The environment is very important, not only for us, but for our children. Thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to answer any questions of yours. I might have been speaking for hours on end because in the Russian railroads we have all kinds of new developments, and I'm always interested to tell about them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Artem, and thank you for giving us an update on the development of the Russian railroads and your logistics arm, a very big contributor to the automotive logistics industry. So now it's time for your questions and comments from the audience. If you are following on the live stream from somewhere around the world, you can also submit questions onto our screen that comes to the moderator, so you can submit questions like that as well. But the preference is always given to somebody, whoever is in the room. So if you have any questions, excuse me, if you have any questions, please raise your arms, and if you can say your name and your company name, and of course the questions or comments can be in either Russian or English. Okay, there's a question in the middle here, please.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Меньшикова Екатерина, General Motors. Вопрос к Вильгельмине, и вопрос следующий. Как сейчас...
And my question is how the customs authorities are conducting the post-customs control as of now. And do the results of this control, are they reflected in the index of the company within the rating that you've mentioned? Thank you, Ekaterina. A very nice question. We are trying always to follow the indicators of these controlling activities after customs clearance, or at least to see how they depend on the or what the correlation is between these indicators and the activities of the customs authorities. As of today, there is such an indicator as the customs payment collected or after the post-customs control. This amount is not as big if we compare it with the customs payments accrued after the control in the course of declaring the goods. But we try to understand how to improve this system within the dialogue with the Customs Authority and the Ministry of Economic Development, so that these parameters, these indicators would be quite relative, so that we would be able to look at the efforts taken or the amount of control measures conducted at the declaring stage and accrual of customs charges, and the post-control measures and the amount of charges in this post-control stage, in order to show for the customs authorities that the post-control is more effective. We usually base our arguments here on the following. We want to achieve a smaller burden for the business, because when you have your goods stopped at the border, this is very difficult for a company with huge costs. But on the other hand, this is also a resource of the customs body, meaning that the activity they carry out has to be secured by a certain number of personnel, their inspectors. And if we develop this system more, we have to improve not only the parameter of the customs payments added, but also the customs payments collected at the end, because not all the payments are collected immediately. And sometimes the decisions of the customs authorities are being challenged. That's why the amounts may change. I, as of now, see that there is a certain shift towards post-control, and the categorization system is also aimed to shift the main attention to the post-control system, not the control at the stage of the declaration of the goods.
Okay, I have a question here for Wilhelmina. You talked about the special status that car makers and part suppliers can get through customs, but is this also available for logistics service providers?
It's also a very good question, Louis, thank you. And I should mention that indeed in current draft of Customs Code of Eurasian Economic Society, we just included such term and possibility to obtain the status not only by company who is importer, exporter or declarant, but also as a provider in the logistic chain. Yes, okay. But I am not sure the opinion from our countries, but currently it is the term in the draft.
Okay, thank you. Is there a question over here?
Добрый день. Николай Дворянкин, Автолинк России.
Autolink Russia. My question is to Artem Shepelev. Artem, thank you for your interesting presentation. Can you provide a comment, a more detailed comment, in terms of RGD's strategy, how it is working with its own subsidiaries? It is no secret that everybody is interested when these subsidiaries will will be joined into one subsidiary, whether it happens or not, or the brands will exist separately from each other? What is the policy of RGD in terms of its subsidiaries in the short-term perspective? Thank you, Nikolai. As I've already mentioned, yes, we have quite a lot of subsidiaries within our holding. It is no secret. There are our potential customers present here and partners, and you all know that there are sometimes such situations that our own subsidiaries may compete at one and the same tender. This is not right. For us, I represent the head office based in St. Petersburg, and via the mechanism of the project management, we're trying to avoid this situation. Certainly, we need transparent management and governance tools. I want that all the people present here have to understand that this is the same RGD holding, which I tried to make clear in my presentation. And we at our head office, we try to distribute the activity among our subsidiaries, at least in the Northwest. The question that you've asked is very interesting. I would like to know the answer to this question. This year, we have to work out and come to a certain decision how to manage the whole brand. We understand certainly that in the automotive logistics, there are companies with stronger competencies. There are companies with a smaller share of or percentage of shares. In any case, we are going to do it in such a way that our partners or our colleagues won't lose or won't suffer. I can't predict which subsidiary will remain in the segment of the automotive logistics, but I can certainly guess who has bigger chances. But this is my personal opinion.
Questions? Question right at the front, please. In Russian, please, if you can.
Yeah, I'll try. Christopher Ludwig, Automotive Logistics. Question for Wilhelmina and maybe for Alexander to comment on as well. In the past conferences, we've spoken a lot about Decree 166 and 566 for suppliers in terms of localization targets, production targets. With the kind of drop in the market, are these targets harder to hit? And from a kind of regulatory framework for Wilhelmina, is there any pushback from the government in terms of when these targets need to be reached, or are those being strictly kind of adhered to? Thank you.
Thank you for question. Yes, when if I'm not mistaken in my understanding of your question, yes, when we categorized the trade members, at first customs service also takes into account the automotive industry and fact that our state bodies support the members of this industry. And as I said, the first participants of the white list were automotive producers. And currently, one of tools how to minimize the customs control is also obtain the status of member of white list for auto components producers and car producers. It's a little bit separate procedure, but also it allows to obtain such a status, being a member of this industry.
I can add as well. I mean, I'm not sure what the government perspective is, but I'm very aware that there is a huge disparity between the manufacturers. You've got some who are pushing 70% localization and working extremely hard, to protect themselves from the currency fluctuations, as well as to come into line with the contractual agreements that they have with the Ministry of Industry and Trade. There are other car manufacturers who've actually stopped the localisation programme on the back of this particular crisis that they're in at the moment. Now I'm presuming that they must have some kind of nod from federal government, because ramifications of not achieving the required amount of localisation, you can just imagine what the back tax is on the billions of dollars of components that have been brought in for manufacturing. So I know there are changes going on, but what the federal government says, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think
maybe let me add a little bit. From the customs control perspective, customs support in different tools, in different ways. Also, in case if you are side of 166 or 566 agreement or not, or you simply manufacturer, and for sure. The government, Russian government, are very interested in localization, and up to 2018 and up to 2020. As I know, they support our producers who are parts of such industrial assembly agreements. And as I know from practice, it's rather difficult to achieve localization percentage, but in law enforcement practice, customs bodies and from, as I know from the representatives of Ministry of Industry and Trade and Ministry of Economic Development, they are rather they are ready to consider the terms why you can't achieve this particular percentage. They are rather to redraft maybe your terms in the agreement concerning obligatory technological operations, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you very much, Wilhelmina. Okay, I think we've gone over time now, so thank you very much to the panel for a very interesting discussion on regulations and customs, the state of the automotive industry and the development of the logistics industry. So thank you very much to the panel. I hope you enjoyed the first session, those of you in the room. And those of you who are watching the streaming live from around the world, I'd also like to say hello to Elena Jadanova, who I know is watching us from Vladivostok. But if you'd like to join us for our coffee break hosted by Jeffco. Thank you very much.